Hello, guys, and welcome to the Dental Startup Journey. My name is Maritza Duran, and I help dentists launch or acquire their first dental practices successfully to break even in record time and build profitable and fulfilling dental practices. In today's episode, I am answering the question, should I do the startup path or should I do the acquisition path? Let's jump right into it. I wanted to hop on live today to talk a little bit about a question that I'm often asked by my clients. Question I often get asked is, should I do a startup or should I do an acquisition if I am considering practice ownership as a new dentist? So let's talk about the first thing that I always tell my clients, or generally speaking, the first question that you should ask yourselves about practice ownership, and that is, what is my risk tolerance, right? So when we're deciding to start a business, we need to start by discussing what is my risk tolerance, right? Everything that we do in life is risky. So if we talk about staying as an associate, right? If you're staying working for someone else developing their dream, that is risky, right? So staying at a job that you hate is risky. Then starting a business and doing it from scratch with no security, no future, not understanding, no clear path is risky. And also starting a business that you're acquiring somebody else's structure and legacy and everything else is risky. So I'm talking to my doctors, answering a question that I get asked a lot, and they're always confused about whether it's best for them to start a practice from scratch or to take over a practice that it's already run by somebody else. And so I wanted to give them some insights about what is my recommendation in this case. And the first thing that I want to basically cover is talking about our risk tolerance, because I, as a new business owner, I'm the first one in my family to start a business. I took on a major risk, and you first need to measure what is your risk tolerance before you embark on anything new, because there are going to be a lot of challenges and a lot of obstacles along the way, and you need to navigate those beforehand. So the three questions that you're going to ask yourselves, for those of you who are considering practice ownership, is number one, what is my risk tolerance? Number two, how do I prepare myself for the challenge of business ownership? That's just a generic question. And the third one is, which plan based on research is going to best align with my personal and professional goals, right? So the first section, let's talk about your startup path. What if you were to consider starting a business, starting your practice, and you decide, hey, I think starting from scratch is one thing that I am considering and that I want to learn more for. So let me tell you a couple of things about the benefits of starting an office from scratch. The first benefit is you're going to have full control over your branding, right? You're going to have full control over the systems that you're going to implement and your vision, right? So that's something that is a positive to starting a dental practice from scratch. Now remember, the first thing that you need to do is check on your risk assessment or your risk tolerance to figure out, okay, what are the pros and cons? So one benefit to doing a startup is that you're writing the Canva, the story from absolutely scratch. And you're going to have your brand, your name, it's going to be built the way that you want. So you're going to be in full control. Now, another benefit to doing a startup is that you're not going to inherit any bad habits from the legacy and issues from the previous owner. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the stories of some of the doctors that I have gone through this. And number three, it's the potential for high profitability in the long term. And I'm going to I'm going to share with you, what do I mean by that? So I have two doctors that I've worked with, dentists, whether they're doing a startup or doing an acquisition. So right now I have a dentist that started our journey together and was considering doing a startup. She wants business ownership. She is tired and upset and it's ready to go on her own. And she's done with building somebody else's businesses as an associate. She has a family, she has her husband, she has her husband's support, and it is now the time for them to embark into business ownership within their household. And we started exploring options, looking into potential locations for doing a startup. And it's been a long journey, specifically in the area where she is considering practice ownership. And now we are going through the process of acquiring the office where she's currently working as an associate. So when one of the questions came about acquisitions and the advantages of the acquisitions, that it is really the benefit to doing an acquisition versus a startup has to do with the cash flow, which is one of the disadvantages of doing a startup. So the cons of doing a startup is that you don't have any instant cash flow. You have to start with patient zero. And one of the biggest things that I help my clients do with the help with my co-founder is to be able to help them figure out how many patients they need to see in order to cover costs before they go into practice ownership. So all of those projections are really important for them to consider. So one of the cons for doing a startup is the no instant cash flow. You have to build it from the ground up, right? You are going to have a longer runway before you are actually seeing a return on the investment, which is extremely important. A lot of times the attractiveness of acquiring an existing practice come from the fact that there's already cash flow, because there are patients already that are registered with this practice and have been coming to this location. So you have that cash flow coming in if you are going to acquire a practice. And those are one of the things that seem to be very attractive about that option. And number 3, the risk of doing a startup is that you have more risk up front, and because there is no existing patient base. So again, you have to go out there and cover all these bases, right? So it's scary to do a startup, and as I said before, it is risky, right? No matter how you slice it, it's going to be risky for you to do a startup. Now let's talk a little bit more about the acquisition path, right? What is it that are some of the advantages of acquiring the existing practice of someone that is retiring? We have now DSOs that open their practices in certain areas, then they have trouble with maintaining associates that are willing to go there and commute, and it becomes very difficult for them to run. So a lot of times they clean their portfolios and then they put it back in the market. They are now flipping dental practices. So you may be able to find an office that has been plumbed, equipped, that has a couple of charts from, or you may have a location that it's a retiring doctor and you can take over the practice and it already has a patient base, which is attractive, and the cash flow that it's coming in helps you sustain it. So you're not starting from patient zero, right? The second benefit to having to do an acquisition is that you already have a team, right? With option number 1, when you are doing a startup, you need to build a team. You need to go out in the marketplace and start attracting potential candidates to be your front desk person, to be your dental assistant, and you are going to be putting a team together. So it requires a little, I shouldn't say more, but it's a different type of challenge, because trust me, I do them both all the time, and it is always, to me, in my personal opinion, a lot easier to put a team together in your way than to adjust to an established team that it's already programmed a certain way by the seller and all these other things. So the third benefit to doing an acquisition is that it's easier for you to finance it, because the banks are looking at it as it is already an asset. It is already an established practice. So they just review the P&L, the numbers, to make sure that, hey, if there's constant cash flow coming in, it is easier for you to borrow the money to be able to take over an existing practice, okay? But as everything else, there are the pros and cons, and my role in providing guidance to my clients, and for those of you who are joining me to watch this live today, is not to convince you with one over the other. I strongly feel that success is where planning and opportunity meet. And if you find the right opportunity and you prepare yourself for it, then it's a win-win for everyone, right? So I am not in a position to guide you towards one versus the other. I just want to give you the pros and cons so that you can make informed decisions and help you build a plan around the location that you find that it's in best alignment with your personal and professional goals to make it work for you, not against you, right? So the challenges with acquiring a practice, the first thing is outdated systems, outdated cultures that are not necessarily in alignment with you. One of the things that we're going through right now is for my doctor that it's acquiring a practice, that there are a lot of cultural challenges in place, and we already know that these people are not within the vision of the practice. So it's almost like I always tell my clients, when you're starting or when you're embarking, whether you're recruiting people for the first time or getting into a practice, you need to know that where you are preparing to take your business, everyone else needs to know, hey, this flight is heading to the DR. And if you're looking to travel to Mexico or someplace else, then you're in the wrong flight, right? Like, just, we have to fly together with the people that are heading to the same destination. And there needs to be alignment where you know and you have your path forward, and they want to be part of that path. And what happens with a lot of acquisitions, in my experience and from observation, is that the loyalty and the training is programmed around the seller's culture and the set and everyone else. So how do you manage that, and how do you come across that becomes a challenge for you? So that's the first thing. The second challenge is that you're going to have a higher purchase price due to the goodwill of those patients. So basically, the other challenge with taking over an existing practice comes with the price, right? I find that the loans tend to be higher, and a lot of times when you take over these practices, you are paying for the retirement of the doctor that is retiring, and the team is paid based on their longevity for how long they've been with the seller. And a lot of times, because the seller had been already at a plateaued, the team is not really that thriving or pursuing growth at this time anymore. So it becomes challenging for you to break that cycle. And this is where I find a lot of my doctors struggle with. So the second challenge is higher price, because again, the startup and the acquisition cost will be on or about the same, but the lending or the payments and the structure of the loan tends to be the premium higher, which increases your overhead and it makes it more challenging for you. And the challenge number 3, and I would say that this is the biggest one, you're paying for the good faith of the charts, but retaining those patients, it's a challenge after the transition, because they don't, when I go to the doctor, there was a change in one of my physicians, and I went and Googled my doctor and started recently going to them, because I'm not married to anyone. So no one in this, stage and age is going to, they sell you the goodwill, but the patients ultimately decide. And it's very important that you understand the cultural difference between the seller and the buyer, because some people tend to be driven more towards one type of, whether it's ethnic group or, whatever it is, you have to be mindful of that. So that's one of the biggest risk I see when it comes to acquisitions, when it comes to the transition, the attrition rate, which sometimes can be up to 40%. So imagine you take over the team and you take over the charts and you have a 40% attrition. Now your overhead, it's $50,000-$60,000 a month, right? You can't have the mentality, oh, if the team lives, or I'm just going to treat it as a startup, right? Because the cost of you operating this practice is not the same as a startup that it's able to manage the operational expenses and hire a team at a lower entry level, build it, and then gradually grow the overhead over time as the income increases, right? So the business expenses grow with you. You have your break-even point, which is a lot of times half of what I see when it comes to the overhead cost of an acquisition. So you have to be mindful of those things. So which one is right for you, right? I just went over a couple of insights about what does the process looks like and the pros and cons of doing a startup, the pros and cons of doing an acquisition. And so it is now up to you, associate dentists out there thinking about practice ownership, which path is the best for you moving forward. And again, I want to reinforce the 3 questions that I want you to ask yourselves as you're going through this introspective work. Number 1 is, do I thrive in a structure, or do I like building things from scratch, right? Like, I am the type of person that I'm great at getting things started, and I build the systems as I go along. And if you're someone that already likes the structure, then this is one of the questions that you want to ask yourself. Number two, am I financially prepared for the journey of that a startup requires? Meaning, do I have enough capital? Am I going to manage my spending wisely? And ultimately, am I going to have enough cushion and the branding in place to be able to have patients lined up for me so that I'm able to break even and cover costs faster, which is a challenge because you have to wear many hats with the marketing, especially if you are going to go in the route of doing a startup. And number three, do I want full control, or am I okay with just basically inheriting someone else's vision and team to guide me and basically adjust to their culture and that the way that they are, running things at that established practice? So at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer for you to move forward, right? As I always say, there's not, a one size fits all answer, but it comes down to your risk tolerance, your vision, and your long-term goals in order for you to decide, do I start a practice from scratch, or do I take over an existing practice and acquire a location? So that's basically what I wanted to cover today. For those of you who found it helpful and useful, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments, say startup or say acquisition, whichever one you prefer, or which one you are considering in your path and in your journey. And I will be able to answer any other questions that you may have along the way. Feel free to DM me with any questions if you are in the ownership journey of your first dental practice. I'd love to learn more about you and your journey as well. So, and I'm happy to share with you more details and resources to send your way. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like it, please make sure to subscribe, like it, and let me know in the comments what is the one pressing question that you have about practice ownership so that I can answer on a live video as well for you. Looking forward to staying connected. Till next time.